Hello, everyone. This is Simon Goncharenko, Safeguard Solutions with DataSpace podcast. And with me today, I have Guy Willner, an extremely interesting individual sitting in London, England right now. Just a quick overview. In 1998, Guy co-founded IXEurope, which 9 years later, he managed to be able to turn around and sell to Equinix for $550 million. And turned around in 2010 or 11 and co-founded IXcellerate in a company in Moscow, Russia. And so in a lot of ways, this interview is actually really near and dear to my heart because I was born and raised over in that part of the world, and Russian is my first language for the first 17 years of my life. So it's really, really neat for me for a lot of reasons to be able to interview. First, really easy and obvious question. What is the significance of the IX in the beginning of your company names?
That's delving into ancient history. When I started off my business back in 1998, I had to register a name, and I was in an accountant's office, and they said, you better register a name quick because you're beginning to start doing business. So I sort of, there were lots of internet exchanges going around. So I thought, well, internet exchange, IX. And then I just sort of ran through a number of names. We quickly checked trademarks and availability, and I came across IXEurope, which sounded pretty good. So we went ahead with that. And since that sort of 10-minute decision in an accountant's office in 1998, I've kind of always used the IX thing as my little franchise. So I've had IXEurope, IXcellerate, and IXAfrica for our new Kenya venture.
Right. Wow, that's an interesting story. Isn't that interesting? Some of life's biggest decisions end up being made right there on the spot, and then you just kind of end up sticking with it. That's very interesting. So next question then, you've kind of already led into that with IXcellerate. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, IXcellerate. Yeah. All
right. So why Russia?
Well, again, it comes back to your life decisions. I'd left Equinix. So I was president Europe for Equinix after they bought the company, and then decided to sort of let them get on with it because they were perfectly competent to do that. Got involved in Terraco in South Africa and joined the board there. And then I was approached by the European Bank for Reconstruction Development, EBRD, to do a project in Russia and to be chairman of it. And I thought that's pretty cool. So I went for the interview a couple of weeks later, and they said the project wasn't going ahead. Intel Capital and Sumitomo were pulling out. And I thought, well, I'll go and have a look anyway. So I'd never been to Russia. You know, I'd lived in Hungary for 3 years. That's about as close as I got. And I'd done projects in Vienna, but never Russia. So I went there, met the team, thought it was good, thought this is going to be easy to finance because it's a big country, you know, big market. And it wasn't. It took about 2 years to get financing in. We brought the World Bank in, IFC, in the end in 2012.
Very interesting story. So something that you kind of touched on in your response is Russia is a very different country, especially for a Westerner. And I know that now, having done sort of the backward of that experience, having grown up there and come over here. And so one of the sayings, they have lots of different sayings, but one of the sayings in Russia that they have is better to have 100 friends than 100 rubles. And I'm sure that you've learned a few others. And so my question to you as a Westerner coming to that part of the world, what were some of the strangest, or perhaps what was the strangest of those foreign concepts that you totally get now?
I mean, there's lots of them. When I got to Russia, I'd already run a business across Europe, and believe me, you know, the cultural difference between Geneva and Zurich is a gulf as well, you know, let alone Germany and France and the UK. So I'd lived in Hungary, and I worked in Paris and Vienna. So I kind of got used to being open and understanding and listening and trying to understand the cultural, you know, roots of some of this stuff. So yeah, Russia was all sorts of surprising things. I mean, when you hire somebody in Russia, from the time that you interview them to the time they move, you have 2 weeks. If you don't get yourself into gear and make them an offer, they will have accepted a job somewhere else. So people move super fast in Russia. That's one thing.
Wow.
Second thing is you know, the friends and rubles. You know, friendships are for life in Russia, and surprisingly, you know, the Russians are it's a very, very much a trust-based economy, and so once you've got a bunch of really good friends that you've worked with, you get a lot of respect and support.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
I
it's
guess
so
the,
true.
the other sort of surprise in Russia was how kind of old world to a certain extent, in the sense that you talk to maybe a junior technician in your company, and within 10 minutes you're talking about Tolstoy,
Mm-hmm.
and and have you read any Lermontov or something like that, which
Mm-hmm.
just is just very, very unusual for certainly in the UK that would never happen.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Yeah, one of the sayings I don't know I remember just growing up in Russia is if you a good friend, a really close friend, will give you a shirt off his back. That's not something
Yeah,
they'll even think twice about. So
yeah.
that's definitely interesting. So let's move on to some of the things that you've accomplished. Just looking at your website and doing a little bit of research on you on LinkedIn, um, some pretty amazing things with the two facilities that you have in Moscow right now. One of the things, for example, you guys talk about is tier 3 designation with 5 nines there, 99.999% of uptime, zero time for outages and those kinds of things. That's pretty impressive. What do you accredit that to?
Well, for a start, I've been in this business since '99, so unfortunately, I can talk for hours and hours and hours about data centers. So, what in terms of our standard design, in terms of where we operate, it's all so standardized now, and we've got a sort of happy band of people I've worked with for the past 20 years who helped me with that. That said, our Russian team, we've got 85 people out there, and they are all Russian now. We've Russified the organization, and they are very, very hot. But it's just keeping the same philosophy, which is, if you are an Apple or an Amazon or an Alibaba, and you're off the plane at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow, and then you truck over to our data center, and yesterday you were in Virginia or New Jersey or whatever, you should feel the same emotion as you
Mm-hmm.
get through the data center doors. So we're into replication. We're trying to carbon copy what we did in Western Europe, so that everybody sees everybody gets what they expect, and that's really worked very, very well with the international clients.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Is that sort of the same answer with regard to another impressive statistic of a 6-minute customer ticket response time? Is that were you applying sort of the same philosophy, and was some of that a transfer or transferring what you learned from IXEurope?
Yeah, I mean, one of our customers at IXEurope and later Equinix in Europe was Rackspace, and Rackspace, their fanatical support and all their crazy stuff. And I remember going to San Antonio once to see the guys there, getting my Stetson hat and everything. As an Englishman, that was great fun. And I remember seeing the customer care desk, and with like 50 people on it or whatever. And the amazing thing is that they had the company's financial targets above their heads. So even the customer service people knew what the sort of EBITDA target was for the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So that that sort of rubbed off on me a little bit. And in Russia, we are crazy focused on customer service.
Hmm. And it shows. I mean, your results are showing, which is really, really neat. We just are sort of coming out in a lot of countries around the world. Some are still dealing with it very much, but the whole COVID-19 thing. Talk to me a little bit, if you don't mind. In your opinion, how would you rate the success of your efforts with regard to COVID-19? And is there a plan to loosen some of these restrictions? And if so, when?
Well, we had to go quite heavy. I mean, the Russian state doesn't do things by halves. So, if a law is enacted, it gets implemented straight away. So you've got to be careful you don't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want is some junior government official closing your data center down. So we were really careful right from the beginning. We ended up within sort of a few days of all the issues beginning to happen, we had 3 medical staff on 24/7 on campus. Checking out people. Then we eventually closed the data center down for external visits. At some point, we were doing some massive installs for a Chinese customer. And so what we did is combined ourselves and about 4 of our Chinese customer technicians. We actually put them up on site. So we ended up with an A team and a B team.
Right.
Ended up going and buying 16 beds, a washing machine, and some of our technicians were saying they'd prefer to stay on in the data center because the food was so good.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Now, it's slightly loosening up, but Moscow still, Moscow is loosening up now, so we're slightly loosening up, but we're still very very diligent on, you've got the 5 levels of security, and we've added a few more for the whole medical side of things.
Right. Yeah, that's aggressive is what you had to be able to go successful through that. So very, very interesting. I appreciate that. So another question I have for you is we live in a global society, and your previous experience as far as different businesses you've been a part of, you've already spoken to it here, kind of vast. And so my question is, are there any other leaders of large data center companies or any data center companies that you're pretty good friends with? And if so, how did those friendships come about?
But I'm sure in many sectors in the industry there, you actually find they're quite small. I'm sure in the oil and gas industry, all the CEOs know each other, and electricity generation, maybe it's the same thing. The beautiful thing about the data center industry is that you don't compete geographically. So, if Tencent wants a footprint in Russia, that they're not going to go to South Africa or to London or whatever. So it means that you can have friendships which endure. So I got friends who run data centers anywhere from Kiev to Kuala Lumpur to Johannesburg, all over the shop, Australia, US, Canada. So it's a nice group because we all kind of are doing the same thing. We all kind of understand what we're talking about.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because having been in the industry for a little bit, I've sort of come to the same understanding, is that after you have been in those circles, you do get to see some of those same guys in different meetings and different calls and in different interactions. You do realize kind of how small the industry really is when it's all said and done. So I totally get it. So speaking of CEOs, there are lots of different CEOs in this space, but not a lot of them that can talk about the kinds of accomplishments that you've done. Taking a startup and leading it to a $550 million enterprise that is wanted by the biggest dog in the market, if you will, within 9 years. What are some of the biggest lessons that you learned out of that experience, for example?
Well, I think the first thing is it's a long-term play. So if you're bringing capital into these businesses, especially in emerging market, which is a very special animal, then you're really on a sort of a 10-year track, which, sometimes I question why I'm doing Kenya, because I'm just starting on that at the moment. But it's a long-term game. It's a long game. You have to be methodical. You have to really remember the lessons you've learned in the last, apply them, keep your network live, and bring in as much help as you can and as is offered from your network. So, for example, Frank Hassett, who used to be VP of construction for EMEA for Equinix, he's joined us as an advisor for both Russia and for Kenya, and he's helping out because he's built 64 data centers. So if he says, I don't like that design, I don't need 16 pages written about it. I just know that he doesn't like the design, so we better do another one.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's the key. And that's one of the things I was actually really impressed with just doing a little bit of research is just seeing in IXcellerate, for example, how many amazing and brilliant people you surrounded yourself with. I mean, I think that's a really awesome credit to your leadership, because it takes a real leader to surround himself with brilliant people and not be afraid to be outshined or something to that effect. Is that?
Well, I think that's really key. I mean, that's what I learned years and years and years ago when I was working, because I started working in Paris. I spent 5 years in Paris, and my bosses were all pretty smart people. And I learned a lot from them. And one of them did always say, surround yourself with people smarter than you. And, I am probably a little bit lazy, and I'm probably not very, very good at operation focus and processes. And I'm not a brilliant finance guy. My focus is more on sales, business development, strategy, technology. So I think there's two things. One is know your weaknesses. Don't push yourself in a direction where you're just going to not be very good. And second is surround yourself with really smart people. So yeah, I've got people who are much, much better than me in many, many areas, and that's it's really intellectually satisfying.
That's very neat. Very neat. So in one of your videos, you mentioned that Russian capacity will be at max by September, October. What then?
Well, we're desperately looking for a new campus. I mean, one of the problems in these emerging markets is securing land. That said, I was talking to some friends the other day about the US, and they were saying, well, buying a piece of land in the US is hard enough because you buy it and then somebody comes and says, oh, I have the land rights from 100 yards down under the ground. So securing the land is a big thing. We're trying to secure a very big campus for Moscow, which would then put our sort of Moscow 3 and 4 on, and probably have sort of 10 years 10 years capacity. But that's the big next step. That's clear.
That's very interesting. So you've already broached the subject. One of the things I mentioned in the introduction, and you kind of mentioned your newest startup, IXAfrica in Kenya. You also sit on the board of Terraco, which you had also mentioned earlier in our conversation as well. I guess the question is, besides geography, in what ways is your vision or plans for IXAfrica different from that of Terraco, where you're a board member?
Oh, it's different. I mean, Terraco, I'm no longer a board member because that was sold to Berkshire and with a team with Grant Van Rooyen from Cologix, who invested in Terraco. But obviously, I've kept very much in touch with those guys. But Kenya is, with Terraco, we were looking at Kenya at some point because Terraco was Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban, so all in South Africa. And at some point, we started looking at Lagos in Nigeria and Nairobi in Kenya. Sort of, if you look at it, it's a bit of a triangle. So you've got South Africa in the south, obviously, and then Nigeria up in the west and Kenya in the east. And those are kind of the three countries you want to do if you want to cover, as much as you can in terms of population, at least today in sub-Saharan Africa. So we dropped the project with Terraco because Terraco was kind of getting sold and really focusing on South Africa, which is very different from the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. And at one point I thought, well, let's just do Kenya anyway. We've been looking so long at it. And we've got a fantastic team we've built up, but we're literally just starting. So we haven't actually put the golden spade in the ground yet. We've got about 17,000 square meters of land with permission and everything. And we're just, hopefully September we'll start actually digging and putting in the, 4 or 5 megawatts of transformers in there.
Wow. What are some of the challenges so far?
In emerging, I don't know why I do emerging markets. I think I do emerging markets because I think it's fun. I'd probably make far more money if I did it in US or Western Europe, but it would be less exciting. It certainly has its challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges in the emerging market is raising money. I seem to spend my life raising relatively small amounts of money for these projects because you talk to all of these funds and they say, yeah, love it, but we don't do emerging markets. And of course Russia's even more rarefied atmosphere because you have some sanctions on various individuals and various companies, so you have to sort of navigate through that. So Goldman Sachs is our investor there, and they've helped us navigate and be totally compliant with everything. So I think one of the biggest challenges is actually sort of Western perception of the emerging market and the fact that, is there really a business there? Is there really a market there? Should we really invest? I mean, Terraco is a case in point. I remember talking to Intel Capital back in 2008 saying you should really invest. They were looking at investing in Terraco and they said, oh, we don't know. Well, at that point, it went from, I think in 5 years, it went from something like $60 million valuation to $1 billion valuation. So, pretty good return, that one.
That's really interesting. I want to switch to a bit of a personal question, as you sort of led the way to me to ask that by putting your LinkedIn picture, your profile picture being what it is. I believe that was your bass guitar that you're standing with. And all my three boys are emerging musicians from 11 to 16 to 20, and so they found out about this interview and they wanted me to ask a couple of questions. Music is an outlet, it seems like, or does it play other roles in your life?
No, it's definitely an outlet. I mean, I've made sure my children all learn an instrument. I mean, some have dropped it at 14, 15, some have carried it on. The last two are carrying it on. One plays trumpet, the other plays piano. The middle one plays guitar still. So it's definitely an outlet. I mean, it could be anything. You might keep an aquarium and sit in front of the aquarium for an hour a night, but playing music is very therapeutic, I think. And the advantage of Having a band in a company is enormous. But, when I sort of was a bit flunking out of school when I was 17, 18, I had a band, and or rather I was in a band, and a band actually symbolizes or many of the psychological challenges you have in a startup. You're under pressure, you're trying to do stuff, it's very creative, you've got to think. Things go wrong, amps blow up, concerts get cancelled. You've got some strong personalities because you've got some, especially teenage musicians. You've got to manage all that, manage people's expectations, get yourself a set. All of that. It's a fantastic school of management. So to me, it kind of symbolizes, and even getting the band back together is kind of symbolizing getting execs back together who worked in the past. So a lot of parallels.
Wow, that's really interesting. I don't think I even have a clue that was going to come out of that very simple question. So that's really neat. So another question from that in that same area is, what was your favorite concert and why?
Oh, favorite concert? I don't know. Potentially, I remember going to. I got two. One was seeing the Rolling Stones at the O2 with Rudolf Schenker of the Scorpions, who turned up with my old co-founder, who sadly died when he was 53. The guy from Russia, in Russia, an English guy who lived in Russia 25 years, and he was a crazy guy. But his best friend was Rudolf Schenker from the Scorpions, and so. I said, oh, by the way, I booked tickets for the Stones. And he said, oh, can I bring Rudolph along? And of course he can. So we shared a box. And it was brilliant fun. I think that was one of them. The other one was, oh gosh, I can't remember. King Crimson. Seeing King Crimson playing in London in a smaller theatre with a friend. That was just, that was something else.
Huh. Wow, that's really interesting. Well, I tell you what, I have a million other questions, but I know that your time is very valuable, and we've scheduled it. So I appreciate your time, appreciate the candor. Really enjoyed getting to know you, and I wish you all the absolute success in Russia, and especially with the newest startup in IXAfrica. It sounds like you've got all the right pieces in place, and it sounds like the main thing about your style is that you know how to have fun, and it's a joy. And I think when it comes from being a drag to actually being a fun, there's no limit to what you can do, right?
I think it's much, that's right. I mean, we're only on this earth for a short while, so we've got to give it our all, but enjoy it while we do it.
That's right. Thank you so much, Guy. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, sir. Bye-bye.